All right, everybody. So to get started, I'm going to ask you a few questions and I want your opinion, okay? So, for example, I say best French fries, you say In-N-Out because they have the best French fries. That's just fact. Now, I want you to actually say it out loud, okay? So here we go. I say best sneaker brand, you say, I say the tastiest dipping sauce, you say, I say the best coffee in town, you say, I say best ice cream in town, you say, I say best Netflix show to binge, you say, or I say the best Taco Bell item, you say, the best YouTuber to follow, you say, I say the best TikTok account to follow, you say. The point is, on any topic, like no matter how important it is, no matter how unimportant it is, different people are going to have a bunch of different ideas about it. And the same could be said about sex. And yes, we're jumping right into it. I'm sorry, if this is your first week here, you're actually, your first week is our fourth week in a series about sex. And you see, like the whole point of this series is that there's a lot more to the story. There's a lot more to the story when it comes to sex. Like we hear and we see a bunch about sex from different people like friends and celebrities or parents or pastors. And we also hear about it in a lot of different places, right? Like you hear about it in music or in movies. You hear about it in TV, in pornography, TikTok, Snapchat, health class, and even church. And obviously with all of those voices in the mix, there are going to be some different opinions about what's good, about what's bad, about what's best for you. Name a time when a situation turned out totally different once you heard the full story. But here's the thing, when it comes to conversations about sex, one of the biggest problems is all of those opinions come with expectations. Here's what I mean by that. First, there's the expectation to do more, to say more, and to be more. This complicates the story. Like, think about it. There's pressure to feel more casual about hookups. There's pressure to send pictures and to send texts, right? There's pressure to pass along those pictures that you receive. There's pressure to experiment. There's pressure to do what your partner wants. There's pressure to keep up and to participate in conversations about sex. And there's even pressure to have more sex, right? There's pressure to know everything possible about sex, whether or not you're even sexually active. At the same time, there are other voices talking about consent and respecting other people's bodies and boundaries, and that's very important. And then if you've hung out around church or around Christians, then there's even more voices, right? And there's more opinions and more expectations. It may even feel like there's added pressure to do less. There's pressure to not go too far. There's pressure to not even think too far. There's pressure to honor God by honoring other people's bodies. There's pressure to not have sex until marriage. Now hear me out. I'm not saying that those things that I just listed are bad. They're not wrong either. What I'm saying is when you have a topic where different voices are saying different things and have different expectations for you and for your life, it can often feel like we just can't win. No matter whether you decide to do more or you decide to do less, somebody is going to think it's weird. Somebody is going to think it's wrong. Somebody is going to act like somebody else is convincing you to make a choice that's bad for you. So, how do you make decisions for your life and for your life story when everybody seems to disagree on what that should be? Your community group leader is going to have a list. Which are the 2 to 3 situations where you would say high schoolers feel the most pressure when talking about sex? Why do you think they feel the most pressure in those areas? What are some ways that being pressured can affect their decisions? Do you think that these pressures can affect their future? Why and how so? Do you ever feel like you are constantly getting it wrong when it comes to conversations of sex? Why? You see, this question of how do you make decisions for your life and for your life story when everybody seems to disagree on what that should be it's a really good question. And it's one that humans have been asking for a long time. And so before we answer that question, we're gonna take a little history lesson, okay? Now, the Bible is a collection of books. It's a collection of documents that are divided into two sections. You have the Old Testament and you have the New Testament. And these documents, they cover a spectrum. Like you have history, like you have records of history, you have wisdom, you have poetry, and you have letters. Now, the Old Testament covers everything before Jesus came. And the New Testament covers when Jesus was alive, walking here on earth, and after he ascended into heaven. And you see, the New Testament, it starts out with these four books, and they're called the Gospels because they cover Jesus' life when he was here on earth. Now, the Gospels are written either by people who were close to Jesus, like who had eyewitness accounts of what he did, or it was somebody who interviewed people who were close with Jesus, who had eyewitness accounts. And one of the Gospels was written by a guy named John. And John was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. You see, John knew Jesus because they literally hung out every single day for years. They did life together for years. That's actually one of the reasons many people believe events recorded in the Gospels as being true. It's because John wasn't just some random like fan fiction writer. He was actually an eyewitness to many of the things that Jesus did. You see, we're going to look at something in chapter 10, and John records this moment where Jesus says something that's just so amazing that I think it has the potential to change how you and I see every decision about our lives. You see, John writes that Jesus is talking to a group of Pharisees who are not Jesus' biggest fan. And as he spoke, he used stories of everyday things like sheep and farming to describe why he was there, to describe what he was really like. And you see, he uses a few illustrations about sheep and about robbers and about gates that they struggle to understand. And finally, Jesus just spells it out for them, okay? He says this. This is John chapter 10, verse 10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Now, if this sounds confusing, I get it, and you're not alone. In fact, a few verses earlier, John tells us that the religious leaders were confused themselves. But did you catch that last word? It was full. That's what John wrote, that Jesus came to bring life and for us to have life to the full. Now, you see, in its original language, that word gets used to talk about things that are superior, things that are better than expected, things that go beyond, they're over the top. In other words, John says Jesus wants us to have life, but not just any life. He wants us to have more life. He wants us to have a better life. It's Jesus' goal for us in everything, in life, in relationships, and even in sex. You see, Jesus wants us to experience life. What's wild is so many of us think it's the opposite when it comes to what Jesus wants for us. Like it's tempting to think that God's goal for us is life minus everything that's good, right? We think that God's goal is life, but only the boring stuff, life, but without any excitement or anything enjoyable. And Jesus is telling this crowd of followers, and he's telling us today, that we couldn't be further from the truth. He's basically saying, look, I'm not a thief. I didn't come to steal. I didn't come to kill. I didn't come to destroy your life. That's not me. I came to make your life better and fuller than you ever imagined. Read John 10:10. Who are the thieves that Jesus is referring to? What is the difference between the thieves and Jesus? What does it mean when someone wants something for you versus when someone wants something for you? The word Jesus used for thief can actually be also understood as like trickster. So think about a con artist. Like it's someone who makes you think that they care about you, that they have your best interests in mind, but they actually have a different motive. Basically, Jesus is saying that there are people who will make you think they are for you, but they really aren't. But as for him, Jesus is actually for you. He is looking out for you so you can have the full, amazing life he wants for you. And honestly, that's why I think when it comes to your life, when it comes to the people you date, when it comes to the decisions you make in your private life, there is no better decision you can make than to trust Jesus and follow his lead. Everybody else around you will have an idea. They're going to have an opinion or an expectation of what you should do or what you could do. But Jesus knows you. He doesn't just care about this one moment. He doesn't just care about this one decision or this one relationship. He cares about your whole life being better and fuller than you can imagine right now. Out of all the voices, he is the one that will lead you toward that life because Jesus wants more for your story. But here's the thing. This isn't something that just happens. We can't just say, yeah, I want a full life. That sounds great. Jesus, please help me get around to that when I'm like, I don't know, maybe 25, 30. That sounds good. The truth is, Jesus doesn't want more for your story later in life. Jesus wants more for your story now. And living that kind of life means trusting him and following him and listening to him now, no matter what everyone else is saying. So, while we may feel pressure from friends, from culture, to think a certain way about sex or behave a certain way when it comes to sex, you don't have to wonder about who has your best interests in mind or who's looking out for you. Jesus is inviting you to a full life, and that includes sex. Why? Because he wants more for your story. Have you ever felt like God has an agenda with you? How does your view of sex change now that you know God's only agenda is you having a bigger and fuller life than you ever planned? So what does this mean? It means that when you're getting messages from all sides and feeling pressure from everyone else in your life, you can believe Jesus. When you aren't sure who to trust, you can trust Jesus because he wants more for your story. To begin living a life that is full, that Jesus promises, pay attention to the messages you're hearing and believing. That includes messages about sex. Because even though people send you messages about sex, it doesn't mean that those people are for you. So pay attention to what you're hearing. Pay attention to what you think, to what you feel, to what you say when it comes to sex and where those ideas come from. Pay attention to what you do and say around different people and why. Be aware of who is pressuring you and why you feel pressure from them. Be aware of how you may be pressuring others and what makes you want to pressure them. And pay attention to what Jesus is saying to you. A few verses after Jesus says he wants us to have life to the full, he refers to himself as the Good Shepherd. And then he says, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." Remember, sheep and shepherds were a common thing back then, but you get the idea. It's a metaphor, right? Like these people who belong to Jesus listen to his voice. They follow him because he knows better than anybody else, right? And he can be trusted. They don't follow him because they're afraid of him. They follow because being close to him is the safest place to be. And the same is true for you. Ultimately, the best decision you can make for yourself is to listen to his voice and to follow him. That's true for every part of your life, including the decisions that you make about sex. Maybe for you, that means it's time to start reading his word for yourself or start spending time talking to him by yourself. Maybe it means when a lot of voices say different things about what's best for you, you make sure his is the only one that you're listening to because he wants more for your story than internet sites. He wants more for your story than your dating partners, than your friends. He may even want more for your story than you do. Listen, I realize figuring out exactly what following Jesus looks like for your specific dating life and your specific situation can be tricky. Okay, that's actually one of the reasons we have community groups and we have community group leaders. It's so that you have a place to talk about what's going on in your life, to talk about your situation. When you aren't sure what it looks like to follow Jesus in this area or in that area, you have people that you can figure it out with. How can this community group help each other not feel pressure when it comes to sex? You see, the truth is, sex is complicated. And like we've been talking about the last 3 weeks, when it comes to sex, part of what makes it so complicated is that we often hear part of the story. We only hear one side, or we only hear certain conversations, and there's always more to the story. And that's why whether the voices around you say you should be doing more or you should be doing less, I want you to know that you can trust what Jesus says more than all of them, because Jesus wants more for your story. All right, everybody, thanks for hanging in there. I know these past 4 weeks may have been challenging because talking about sex, especially in church, can be a little awkward, right? It can be difficult, but I trust that you were mature enough to handle it. I trust that you had some good conversations, and so I'm proud of you for hanging in there, but don't worry, it's over, okay? At least for this year. Before you go, I do have a number of announcements for you. So first off, if you haven't heard already, Antonio, he's one of our seniors. Antonio is in the hospital. His appendix ruptured, which is a very serious thing. And so when you're watching this, I don't know if he's still in the hospital or if he's out, but nonetheless, I want you to be praying for him, okay? Pray for healing, pray for recovery, pray that he would feel God's hand over him. And surround him with love, like send him a text message or like get him a card or something. That's always meaningful. So that's the first thing. Second, I'm actually really excited. We have a prayer and worship night coming up. So I'm going to put that date and time right here. But what that means is literally it's a night where we come together, we worship God through music, and then we spend time praying. And that could be praying for one another, praying for things going on in our country. It could be like praying for healing over each other. So that's what it is. And so I hope you'll come. It's going to be a great time, but I also want to be very just blunt here for a second. If it's not something you're interested in, like if you don't like singing songs, if you don't like praying for other people or praying with other people, don't come. Like, if you're going to be distracting, if you're going to be laughing, just please don't come. I'm not trying to be mean. I just don't want to take away from the experience for those who are there to actually encounter God in a very real way. Now, with that, I do have an event for everybody. Okay, so we are going to be having an afternoon where we play kickball and we barbecue, have some hot dogs, hamburgers, things like that. So once again, that date and time are going to be right here on the screen. So feel free to invite some friends to that if you'd like. Lastly, I know you're bummed, I'm bummed that Mexicali isn't happening. It sucks, okay? So I've been trying to figure out something that we could do to serve. And there's an organization, actually it's all throughout the world, but they have a base in Fresno. It's called Johnny and Friends. Johnny and Friends ministers and works with people who have disabilities. And those disabilities can range. It could be maybe a person who's in a wheelchair who can't walk. It could be a person with Down syndrome. It could be a person with autism. It could be someone who can't talk. Like, there's a whole spectrum of disabilities, but nonetheless, they work with them, ministering to them, sharing the gospel, and just sharing love and joy. And I'm very excited that over spring break, there's an opportunity for you to serve with them. So they have short-term missionaries who normally help with their in-person family camp, where you come alongside a family and you spend like all day with that child who has a disability, and you're just their buddy for the week. Now, they can't have in-person family camp, but what they're doing is a virtual family camp. And I know everyone hates virtual, but it's still an opportunity where you can do things in person, because they can't have everyone together in one place. Honestly, people with disabilities are more prone to the coronavirus than anybody else. And so They're doing a virtual family camp, but you can still be a buddy for a person who has a disability. And it's actually really cool. There's things like going to their home and doing things with them. So if this sounds interesting, please talk to your community group leader. Tell them you're interested in being a short-term missionary for Johnny and Friends. They'll get that info to me, and I'll get you a ton more info that I can't share because it'd take way too long. So anyways, that's the serving opportunity we have over spring break, and I hope you'll jump into it and be a short-term missionary. So hey, thanks for hanging in there. I know I had a ton of announcements, but you did good, and we'll see you next week.